Welcome to this week's Midweek Online. It's lovely to have you joining us. And today I'm being joined by Sally. Sally is going to give us an idea of what happened when she became a Christian and what it means for her to walk with Jesus now. So, Sally, it's lovely to have you with me. Thank you. Tell me a little bit about how you became a Christian. How did that all come about?
Okay, so I grew up in a family that didn't go to church, would have called themselves a Christian, as most families did back then, christened as a baby. I remember going to church a couple of times with a cousin of mine, older cousin who was a Christian, going to Sunday school, really enjoying it, and even taking out a children's Bible at the library a couple of times. I took that out, read it right through. Yeah. Then as a teenager, going along to a youth group, church youth group, although we only went for the boys, and wasn't much Bible teaching going on initially. At some point towards the end of me being there, they did kind of become more evangelistic in their approach, and I did have kind of a moment, a come to Jesus moment, if you like, but didn't go anywhere with it. And then going into adulthood, just completely fell away, really, from anything that I might have done. I had my first child at 18. I think I was a single parent at the age of 21 with 2 children. Life just kind of bumbled along. So I've got 4 children. I've got Lauren, Becky, Leah and Phoebe. So when I had Leah's now 17. After I had her, I became quite heavily addicted to cocaine. Was using regularly. That was impacting quite seriously on my parenting. And social services become involved. So this was about 16 years ago. 15, 16.
Leah was really little.
Yeah, so it started just not long after she was born. So the first year of her life, really. It was. I describe it as hell on earth. I felt like I was in a deep, dark pit that I could not get out of. Just literally trying to scramble up out of. It was a really difficult time. I had lots of intervention, and I did come close to losing my children because of it. And knew I had to stop, but there just wasn't the real motivation for me to do that. I knew what I had to do, but wasn't. And then one day, I remember it as clear as day, even now, being at my kitchen sink, and hearing his voice saying, "Sal, you need to stop this now." At the time, I probably thought it was God talking to me, but didn't go anywhere with that. I did stop after that. The children came off the child protection plan that they were on because of my use. And again, things started to get better. You know, obviously stopped using the drugs. Life seems a bit clearer. I had a lot of support to help me through that time. And I got to the stage where I actually went to work for social care. A few years later, following on from that episode. And I remember at the time, you know, social services or the council is quite a diverse area, and just seeing people with different faiths. And although at the time thinking that my life was the most settled it had ever been,
Yeah.
you know, my adult life, and things were looking really positive. I had a good job,
Yeah.
you know, I had money for the first time ever.
Yeah.
I was in a good relationship. I had my children. They was all quite happy, but just still felt like there was something missing. And I remember speaking to various colleagues who had those who had other beliefs, other faiths, just talking to them about what they believed. And still, it was still a few more months down the line before a colleague, a social worker that I was working for, invited me along to an Alpha course.
Okay.
So she'd been invited along and was really nervous about going, and didn't want to go on her own. And she said, "Will you please come with me?" And I was like, "Yeah." You know, just I didn't even hesitate to answer. Anyway, we went to this Alpha course in Billericay.
Yeah.
And it was okay. It was interesting. We went along every week.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I think I was thinking that I would have this thunderbolt moment where it would be really clear to me that yes, God is real. Yeah. Jesus was real. Yeah. And I'm just going to believe it all. Yeah. And didn't have that.
Didn't get that.
No. Okay. It was really quite frustrating, and I do remember going along to one of the sessions. Actually, I'd had a conversation with my friend beforehand around forgiveness, and I think we must have been touching on it in the Alpha course, and just being really tearful before the session, saying, "How can God forgive me if I can't even forgive myself for what happened?" You know, but with the children and the drug use. And and we went into that next session, and it was someone different leading it. It was a woman leading it this time rather than the minister. And she turned around, I can't even remember how it started, but she turned around and said, "Yeah, you know, you're worried about how you're forgiven. Well, you know, you need to get off your high horse because, you know, you can forgive anyone." And me and my friend just looked at each other and was like, that is from God. That was God telling me that I was forgiven. And so we went through the course. Although I had that moment, I still, you know, you want it laid out. You want it, you know, like a vision, or for it to be written down, you know, "Sally, I'm here for you, I am real." And just didn't get that. So still kept plodding along. Got to the end of the Alpha course. Obviously, Billericay is too far away. I wasn't going to continue going now. And the minister actually recommended St Peter's and a couple of other churches, I think, at the time, as places I could potentially go. And so this was about 11 years ago now. And so I looked up everything that St Peter's had to offer. I saw that they'd done the Christianity Explored. So I contacted Jason Ward, who was here at the time running it. So I booked onto that. I also looked, you know, could see quite clearly loads of stuff going on for the kids. Because obviously this was going to be new for them. At the time, Lauren and Becky. Lauren was a teenager. Becky was just about to become a teenager. It was, you know, they'd never been to church. And so but I wanted them to come along and be included in that. I decided one day that I was going to come along, and it's before I could drive, so I was walking down the road with Leah, and Leah was about 5 at the time. And she was like, "Where are we going?" I said, "We're going to church." And she said, "Yay!" And I thought, "Oh, how do you know about church?" And then as we come up, she went, "We're here." And I just felt so nervous that before she said that, I was going to pull out.
Back round.
I was going to take her to the park. I was just going to keep going.
Yeah.
And but she was like, "Oh, we're here." Anyway, I come in, and at the time it was it was a changeover between services. So obviously downstairs is really busy at that time normally, when we used to have tea and coffee down there. And I remember walking in the door and just standing by the automatic doors. And David Banting just clocked me across the room and beeline for me, and he went, "You're new, aren't you?" And I was like, "Is it show?" And he sat me with Elizabeth Gray.
Right. Yeah.
Because Eddie and Leah were around the same age and they could go into the groups together. Yeah. And that began my time at St Peter's. I did do the Christianity Explored. You know, it still brings up tough questions that the answers don't always sit right, or you're not always quite sure. Yeah. Still never got my thunderbolt moment. Okay. But I think from that, I would have said I was a Christian. Yeah. So that's kind of the long story. Yeah.
That's an incredible story. That's some real big moments actually. So you say you never got the thunderbolt moment, and I sit here listening and think, well, actually, what about that moment? What about that moment? And that's amazing, the way the Lord has just been working on you over many years and through some really hard stuff to have to go through, and some therefore really big questions and really tough things to have to try and think through. And He's been working on your life and in your life through all of that, hasn't He? Which is really incredible. And you may not feel like you had that thunderbolt moment, but I can hear those thunderbolt moments.
A few drop in.
Absolutely. So obviously that was your story up until sort of 10 years ago. You came to St Pete's, and then you became a member here. What's kind of, I suppose, happened since then? How have you grown and changed as a Christian since then?
I think I've massively grown and changed, and it's a continual growth. It's not a case of, you know, after 2 years, like you see yourself as a mature Christian or anything. You know, it has been a real roller coaster. There's been times where I've lapsed a little bit, or not being quite so strong in my faith. I suffer quite badly with anxiety and depression, so that's not helpful with my relationship with God. Sometimes takes away from it a bit. It's, you know, I try and work it out. I think it's something like 3 years I spent at St Peter's initially, and that really grew me as a baby Christian and laid some amazing foundations for me. From there I went off to St Paul's in Harold Hill, which again gave me different experiences within the church and as a Christian, and in my growth. And I was there for about 7 years. During COVID, felt quite low spiritually. You know, my husband's not a Christian. We're not a Christian household, if you like. So trying to watch church online and being a Christian at home can be very difficult. And especially when you're separated from your church family physically. And so going through COVID was particularly difficult. I made the decision to leave. I'd just done 2 years training at Cornhill, and even with that, still feeling quite flat and just quite lost, I think. Not just as a Christian, but as a getting on for a middle-aged woman. And just not knowing which direction my life was going in, if it was going anywhere. And just feeling quite lost. And I made the decision to leave St Paul's. I came back to St Peter's. I didn't know if that was the right thing to do, to come back. I mean, I've always felt at home here, even when I left. You know, I think my heart will always belong to St Peter's no matter where I go. And yeah, because of COVID and restrictions and stuff, it was difficult to go and look at other churches. And so I contacted Rob. I know spiritually St Peter's is top notch, and I would be taught well and welcome back. And I spoke to Rob and I said, I'm going to come back. It may only be for 6 months, but I just need to build back up again with my relationship with God. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to come to church. And he was like, that's absolutely fine. And then Hayley Reid got her hands on me.
I was going to say, I feel like there's a bit more to that story. It's like, I'm going to come back for 6 months. I'm only going to come to church. I'm not going to get massively involved straight away because I need some building up in my faith and my love for Jesus. And then what happened?
And then Hayley Reid got her hands on me. She spoke to me and said, I'd really, like, you know, would you consider doing some children's work? And I was like, no, I've been there, done that. I don't think I really want to do that again. And she said, oh, just come and have a chat with me. Come and have a coffee. We'll have a chat. If you want to say no at the end, that's absolutely fine. And I was like, okay. And before I went, I was 95% certain I was going to say no, if not more. I was going to go in and say no. And within 5 minutes, I was saying yes. The woman is just a powerhouse. She's so organised and so on it with what to do and how to do it that I couldn't really say no. It was, you could really see how much they wanted to share the gospel with the children, how innovative they are within it, and what a great team they are. And in that conversation, she then said to me, oh, you're not working, what about doing 9:38? And I said, I'm a bit old for that. And she said, no, you're not. She said, I think you'll be great. I think you'll be really good. And it kind of went from there. And quite quickly, within sort of 3 months, I think it was decided that I'd had the conversations with John and Rob, and it was decided that I was going to start the following September. So already that 6 months has extended. So I started in September, and it's been an absolute joy to be working here and being part of the youth team and being part of the overall staff team and serving within the church. It's been an absolute joy to do.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And what a way the Lord has led you through all of these things. So that's lots of downs. I can hear that in your story. But that's lots of ups as well, if you like. And just ways in which he's kept you going and led you through. If there was, now I haven't told you that I'm going to ask you this question, just to warn you. But if there was one thing that you think has most kept you going in your Christian life, in your walk with Jesus, what might that, or several things, what might those things be?
Certainly the church family. Engaging with church family, just sometimes the conversations, which are God moments. They are moments from God where I've sat down and just had a conversation with someone I might not even normally talk to. And I think that's God telling me and talking to me. I think, especially over the last year, 18 months, I can really see how God is using me, and how even when I think I'm past it and of no use, that he's still going to use me. He still is using me, and even when I think something's done and dusted and isn't going to happen, it's just a case of it's not his timing, it's not his plan. And so I think over the last sort of 2 years or so, I've really held on to that in that, you know, just because something's not happening when I want it to and the way I want it to doesn't mean to say it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or, you know, he's in charge. It's not always easy to hang on to, especially if I'm in my moments of depression or anxiety. It can be hard to hold on to that. But yeah, and so my favourite song is Amazing Grace. You know, as it plays at my confirmation, as it played at my wedding, and I will have it played at my funeral. Because, you know, that line where it says, he saved a wretch like me, and here I'm going to go now. And I just think, you know, I was so far away from him, and such an awful person, and he saved a wretch like me, you know, and that's what I need to hold on to. You know, a Christian once said to me that even if all this turns out not to be true, we've still had a wonderful time, and I've still made wonderful friends and all the rest of it. And not that I'm down in heaven, and that we'll also be up there again with Jesus. It's so true. You know, all my times in the past where I'd be using drugs, or I'd be out partying, or, you know, whatever I was doing where I wasn't in a relationship with God, you think they're amazing times, and they're not. My amazing times have been with my church family, and when we've been worshipping God, either formally or informally. And so, yeah, so that's what I hold on to. That, and even going off, like looking at my upbringing and all those little moments where God was just tapping me on the shoulder, you know, as a child going to Sunday school, reading the Bible, as a teenager at the youth group. I was even randomly prayed for in the middle of Romford when I was a teenager, you know, absolutely mortified at the age of like 13, 14. But I still remember that. And all those moments, you know, when I was using and God was like, no, that's it now, enough, you've had your time. You know, all those times where God has gone, I'm not letting you go. So, I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, it absolutely did. That idea of actually God does not let us go. He doesn't leave us or forsake us. And the way that he's come into it and shown you that in so many different ways, but also through your church family over the years as well. That's an incredible reminder for us all. He works great things in our lives, doesn't he?
Definitely.
Sally, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing all of that. I know these things are hard to share sometimes, but I'm really grateful that you were able to do that. And thank you ever so much for joining us.